I am really excited to call Patrick Buchanan up to the stage. Patrick comes from Good American, and I have a couple fun facts about Patrick here. He was Innovator's top 40 marketers and earned a spot on the Future 50 list by Nice Kicks. You guys, he's a real stalwart. Welcome, Patrick. It's so good to be here.
Where do you want to sit? This is my better side.
That's your better side? All right. It's my good side too. All right. Well, look at us.
Hello. What's poppin'?
It's like Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. I feel like Oprah right now.
I love that.
But growth marketing. Make it growth marketing. All right, Patrick. Patrick is very interesting because post Good American, you went over to a brand, Lulu's, which has been around for 25 years. I remember this brand when I was younger, and Patrick came around about 6 months ago to the brand, correct? So since we are talking about growing communities, what has it been like trying to target this Gen Z consumer, and how difficult or not difficult has it been to really lasso in that community and grow that community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge, especially when you work for a brand that's 25 years old, because the way you do something day one, it evolves and changes so much the way we do it today.
Right.
And I've been with the brand for 6 months, so initially when you start working for a brand, you really want to dive in deep, learn about the brand, learn about the customers. And I've been really lucky because as we've started, we started with a lot of brand work. So I've interviewed a lot of customers myself. We've done focus groups with both Gen Z and millennials, and so we speak directly to our customers and say, what is it that you want? And I think that has been really transformative and helpful, because instead of me, pushing my agenda, which would be Beyonce or something, I mean, I'd be like, let's work with Beyonce, like something like that. So I had to put myself to the side and really kind of think about, what a Gen Z consumer will want. And, we've learned a lot in the past 6 months. And so I'm excited to, be at Lulu's today and be able to help them grow and transform for the next 25 years.
Well, this is interesting. I mean, as you know, I'm from the data side of things, but you said that you directly interviewed a lot of the customers and asked them what they wanted, which is sort of, you assume you know that about your customer, but let's dive into that a little bit. What exactly did you ask them? That you probably didn't just approach them and say, what is it that you want out of our brand? What specific questions did you ask them, and how did you find these customers to interview?
Yeah, we asked a lot of questions, and it was crazy because the room we did it in, it was like the FBI, and so I was behind a glass, so they couldn't even see me. We had a moderator, so I felt like I was like the fly on the wall, the ultimate fly on the wall. But the questions that we were giving the customers were just generally like, tell us about your style, tell us about your preferences, what do you do for work, what do you do for fun? It was really like interviewing. It was almost like a first date, and I think that when you take the time and get a group of people together, you can kind of start using information to kind of put people in buckets and say, okay, well, you're into this sort of thing, but you're not into that thing. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me was around influencers, because I know we all are, working with and hiring tons of influencers, but I found it really interesting with our customers saying that they just wanted representation and they wanted to see themselves. And when they were looking at influencers, they were looking at influencers as an opportunity to see how something like just looks on their body. And so I asked specifically, or I had our moderator ask specifically, what influencers are you following? And it was more surprising that a lot of people didn't even know the names of their favorite influencer. They just knew that they looked like them. And I think that's something that I just see that is just, really changing with this Gen Z audience, is that they really want, that authenticity, and they want to be able to connect with the brand in a deeper way. And so I think as brands, we have to find ways to be able to, create that connection.
And I can imagine that must have been challenging too, because things move at such a rapid pace, and tastes change so quickly, especially when you're dealing with a younger customer. What are some of the other challenges that you encountered? I mean, again, I know that you've been in the job for 6 months, but there's always a challenge, even when you just encounter something in a new job. But even in this interview process of your customers, or in this discovery of these newer customers, talk about the challenges and how did the company pivot to make way for those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is probably trying to figure out who that, I mean, the reason we're doing all these things is because we have a desire to figure out who the customer is. So I think the challenge was kind of like set out before me before I even started. And, you know, I love a challenge, so I'm always looking to work for a brand where I can, you know, be transformative. But I think in general, you know, especially if there are brand marketers in the room, we know how difficult it is to, you know, get greenlit and get our budgets greenlit. And, you know, and I think so many people want to hold brand marketing to the same standards that we hold performance marketing to. And I think that, not just at this current company I'm at, but just in general, I've always found to be a really big challenge to try to make people understand the importance of brand marketing, and that, you know, sometimes it's just a feeling. Like, I just feel like this is gonna be popping, and that's why we need to do it, and I don't wanna hear anything else about it. And so,
yep.
You know, that's really hard for many CFOs to understand, for many CEOs to understand, and for the rest of the organization. But I think to be able to, and I think one of the big gifts that, you know, I have is I try to come in and help people understand the importance of brand marketing, and also just align on KPIs. Because I think that if you're working and the person who you're speaking to doesn't understand what the KPI of the project is, they're gonna hold you accountable always for revenue. And while we wanna move the needle, you know, you also wanna make sure that, you know, the brand mission and purpose is first spoken for. And so many brands are out there. There's such a crowded marketplace that it's really important to stand out. And so I think, you know, making sure that not just, you know, revenue is just the number one thing. It's also kind of like building a brand and building a community.
You mentioned something that was really interesting too, which is the ability to communicate something that's very complicated and put it in simple terms to people that are essentially gatekeeping budgets, and they need to understand why this is working. What are some pointers that you can tell our audience in terms of communication? Is it worth hiring outside sources to try to help with that communication? How were you able to do that in a simple way so you could effectively communicate that this is needed to people that may or may not understand, well, AI is coming and it's not necessarily a bad thing?
Yeah, I think looking at your competitors is always a great start. So it's like, I'm sure if you work at a brand, every brand has a North Star. So, you know, I'll always bring in just a portfolio of like, well, you know, like, so they do it, but we don't. Like, you think we're better than that? I think that's a great place to start. And then as a new person on a team, I always try to prove really early the importance of brand and do marketing activations that can move the needle in even a small way to be able to show people what I'm capable of. And so, for instance, you know, last month on Valentine's Day, we love to celebrate love at Lulu's. You can get all your dresses, whether you're getting ready for a first date or you're getting ready for your big day, your wedding day. You know, you can shop Lulu's. But, you know, I wanted to show that we could get a crowd out and get people really excited. And so we celebrated Valentine's Day by, you know, gifting 100 brides with a free dress. And, you know, we wanted to make the experience. We know that when it comes to planning a wedding, there's so many things to do that, you know, buying your dress or having to pay for that additional thing can just be a hassle that we wanted to take off of her plate. And so, you know, just doing a single social media post saying, hey, like, this week come to our store and we're gonna be celebrating love. And to see the line of people down the block, around the corner, and every bride that came down, we were cheering her on, we were listening to her love story. And so being able to create things that are low cost but really effective, and you can feel the energy from that, I think is always impactful. Because, you know, I did my recap to the team and I'm like, look, this is what we are capable of. And I think when you can continue to illustrate that in small ways, whether it's through a social post or an influencer, you know, early on you have to build the trust. And so I think sometimes people come in two guns blazing, and it's like, we're gonna get to the more experiential stuff and the weird stuff that, you know, is gonna be a little bit harder to account for. But like, to start, let's do some marketing activations that you can really, you know, you can say what the KPI was and that we hit that.
And this was one social media post that generated this type of frenzy?
Well, we posted it on social and we sent an email out. So we did the full rounds, but yeah.
Very effective. Obviously, I would have loved to have seen that.
Oh, I was so nervous. Every time I'm doing an event, I woke up and I'm like, oh my gosh, is anybody gonna come? Is anyone gonna come? And just so nervous. And then I got my first text that said, people have been waiting in line since 5 a.m. And that was like the sigh of relief that I need. I mean, I love a line. I mean, anything I can do, I'd love to get a line wrapped around the block. At Good American, we did the open casting where we found women from around the world to be the face of the campaign, and that was such an impactful thing. But so doing anything where you can get a line, your boss is gonna probably open up the doors and potentially the bank account.
It's that visual recognition that this is actually working. What's interesting is that you celebrated love, but it was across multiple demographics, and you have really built this loyalty. So when we were talking at first, I was really focused in on millennials and Gen Z, but it seems that this is a brand that really kind of essentially wants to live on past that. You're targeting young people at a very young age, and then hopefully they stick with the brand as they have been for many, many years. I know you can't talk specifically about CAC costs, right? But what type of resources are you putting into to spend, without using actual numbers, to acquire that customer at a young age and have them be so loyal to the brand many, many years later? I think we need to borrow a playbook from Taylor Swift, who has had brand loyalty for 15 years. But how would you do that? Or how are you doing that over at Lulu's?
I mean, I think Taylor Swift is a great example because what you'll see Taylor Swift does, and the people who are high performing and who deliver results, is that it's consistency. I think sometimes people think that it's a one and done, but I think you have to show up for your consumer day after day, event after event, activation after activation. And so, I try to find, whatever way you come within the funnel, whether it's social, influencers, we do a bunch of paid events, experiential. So, I mean, we do a combination of all the things. And so I think we're just really trying to capture the attention of a customer and bring them along the journey. And I think that what we know with our brand is if you can get them to, buy their first dress, it won't be their last. Because I hear so many women say, this dress made me feel so special. It made me feel confident. And that's the feeling you want people to leave feeling with your brand. And I think that there's so many brands out there that don't focus on telling their story and telling why they do what they do. It's a missed opportunity to really be able to capture that customer and take them along the journey, because if you have a brand where you're wanting to make people feel their most beautiful and their most special, and you succeed in that, that's the brand that's gonna make you want to tell your friend. That's the brand that you're gonna want to tell your daughter about when you have a daughter, and I think the word starts to travel. So I mean, I don't know if it's any secret. You have to do all the marketing things that we all do.
But how have you been able to, and I think maybe, or how do you see making sure that young customer, you grow with that customer? Is it expensive to make sure that that is happening consistently? Because of course, some brands, I use this example of Tide, for example. Like, you just sort of use your laundry detergent because your parents used it, and it's sort of like your kids will use it because it smells like home. But as a brand with, that's dealing with apparel, and that you want to be that go-to brand for the lifespan, hopefully, of that young person, how do you, is it incredibly expensive to do that, or is it just, this is just the cost that we have to kind of encounter, and this is what's going to happen? Yeah,
I think it's the cost of doing business, right? But I mean, it's like you can't please everyone, and I think that it's like the goal is to be available to that lifespan, but ultimately, we know that there's a window in which most women are attending most of their events. And so I think, we kind of focus on that sweet spot, and, luckily it has a halo effect on a lot of different people.
I know there's so many different brand owners in the audience, and with so many different budget types. And we sort of talked about this in the green room for a second, but when it comes to specificities of budget, and knowing that there are small budgets and larger budgets here, what is something that you could tell audience members that they need to do right now in terms of ensuring that brand loyalty? Where should they spend? Is it about that, amping up that, customer acquisition cost? Is it about really, putting money behind influencer marketing? Is it about activations, or is it about everything? And then if you only have this tiny budget, how do you do everything?
I mean, every brand is a little different. So, I mean, it's not a one size fits all. And so, when I worked at Good American, what we did, we had Khloe Kardashian, so we had a big resource and influencer that, where it's like maybe we didn't have to invest as much in an influencer to drive the collection because we had a very famous founder. But, I think it's depending on you'll see, and I think it's like when you dive into your brand, you'll know the things, or you'll start to learn the things that really get her excited. So, or get whoever your consumer is excited. And so, I think it's not a one size fit all, and I think you kind of have to you have to save, and I think we talked about this, is where it's like save a bit of the budget for some failure. And so it's like, there's some things that just have to work, and so I'm sure your paid budgets, you want to return on those. When it comes to influencer, you want to make sure that they're doing their thing and driving traffic and new audiences. But I think you also have to leave a little bit of room to kind of fail, and I think that's the thing that, as a leader, I really encourage my team to fail fast, and I think no one wants to take the accountability and no one wants to fail. So it's like, I feel like everyone's like afraid to let me know that something didn't go well, and I'm saying, say it, it's fine. We're gonna waste money on something that didn't work, but I would rather know that and move past that than to not acknowledge it. And so, I think that post-mortem where it's like you take a campaign and you look at it and you say, these are the things that worked, these are the things that didn't work, and how can we do better next time? And I think if you are a marketer who can, both celebrate your success, but also learn from your failure, you'll go a long way.
Do you think it is then, in our final sort of minutes together, do you think that it is up to the leaders to create a pathway or sort of a runway for failure? Not to say that you want to just have failure all throughout your companies, but is it up to the leaders to normalize failure when it comes to marketing and make sure that, like you said, you want to make sure that you're learning from your failures, but you also said that you didn't want your staff to kind of come to you afraid to tell you that they failed. What role do the leaders and leadership of the company have to make sure that failure is essentially normalized?
I think the responsibility that a leader has is to make sure that the team is aware of the playing field. Obviously there are certain KPIs that you need to hit. Mm-hmm. And there's certain ones that it's like, it's like, we want this to work, but it's not always gonna work exactly how you want it to. So, I definitely make sure that I'm, letting people know and creating an environment where we have discussions, where we have conversation, where we test the work. I think that you fail a lot less when you have all the right people looking at the work and you're not working in a vacuum. And so I don't feel failure is something that I experience often, because when I look at a plan, I say, did you run it past this person? Did we check it there? Did we do this? And maybe it didn't hit the success measures that we had hoped for, but typically, at the bare minimum, it did its job. And so, I think you try to minimize failure in the sense of making sure that you're prepared. Preparedness makes you fail less. And then ultimately when you fail, it's like, okay, well, what did we learn and how do we do better?
I always say taking the time to make the notes after you think something didn't go well is ultimately the best way to learn something and do better the next time around, and essentially not lose a bunch of money doing it, but learning from that.
That's what I told my last BF. I said, don't be sorry, be better. So it's like, listen,
don't be sorry, be better.
Don't be sorry. I've heard sorry before.
Wait, can Lulu's
how can we be better?
Make that T-shirt and I will buy it. Don't be sorry, be better. I feel like the Indian mom over here. I want to give that to my kids. Don't be sorry, be better.
People talk a lot, but I know we're marketers, so I'm used to hearing a lot of talking. But I like to see action.
I love that, Patrick Buchanan. Thank you so much for being on stage with me. Incredible, insightful conversation. Thank you.